Before you dive into this nightmare, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to see will make you question everyone you think you know. For 2 decades, John List walked among his neighbors like a shadow in plain sight. By day he was the picture of respectability, a loving husband, a devoted father, a member of his church community in Westfield, New Jersey. His neighbors admired his calm demeanor and meticulous appearance. No one could imagine that behind the neat suits and polite smiles lay a man capable of the unthinkable. Inside his home, the List family maintained the illusion of normalcy. The walls were adorned with family photos, gleaming trophies from church events, and the soft hum of a life carefully curated. Every morning, John kissed his wife Helen goodbye and reminded his children to be good, to do their chores, to study. But at night, he meticulously planned a crime so cold, so precise, it would shake the community to its core. John was obsessed with control. Every dollar, every detail of daily life, every interaction. He orchestrated it with a precision bordering on madness. Over the years, debts and pressures accumulated silently. Fear of poverty, of losing respect, gnawed at him. These fears, combined with his meticulous mind, grew into a dark rationale. He believed the world would be better off without his family burdening him. In November of 1971, John List carried out his plan with surgical precision. Helen List was found first, shot in the chest in the master bedroom. Her final expression betrayed no fear, only shock and incomprehension. Next came his mother, Alma, and his children, Patricia, Frederick, and John Jr. Each death was swift, deliberate. The house, once filled with laughter and light, became a mausoleum of normalcy and horror. After the murders, List executed the next phase of his plan. He drove to the bank, withdrew all available funds, packed a small bag with essentials and vanished. To the outside world, the List family simply disappeared. Friends and neighbors noticed nothing at first. John maintained appearances, paid the bills, even sent letters to relatives claiming the family had moved. Over the years he created a new identity, adopting the name Robert Peter Clark. For 20 years he blended seamlessly into society. He worked steady jobs, joined new communities, and built relationships under his fabricated identity. People admired Robert Clark for his integrity, his humility, and his kindness. All the while, the shadow of his original life lingered in the empty Westfield home, untouched and perfectly preserved, a monument to a life extinguished in silence. What made John List terrifying was not just his crime, it was his ability to live a double life without detection. Letters, phone calls, tax documents, and even occasional church correspondence were meticulously falsified to maintain the illusion of his deceased family. Investigators searching for the Lists found a frozen tableau of mid-century domestic life, with the bodies undiscovered for years. The neighborhood speculated. The List house, locked and silent, became an object of fascination. People whispered about the family's sudden disappearance. Some suspected financial trouble, others imagined a tragic accident. No one imagined the true horror. The man who once smiled at them in the grocery store had methodically destroyed the lives of the people closest to him. Even after moving away, List's obsession with perfection never wavered. Every new job, every new town, every new acquaintance was an opportunity to construct another layer of his intricate facade. He read crime magazines, careful to learn investigative techniques. He monitored media reports of missing persons, noting what would and wouldn't arouse suspicion. Over the decades, he became a master of deception, an invisible presence in a world where invisibility itself became a weapon. Yet, even the most meticulous plans can unravel. In 1989, almost 20 years after the murders, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source: television. The America's Most Wanted show aired a profile of the unsolved List family murders. A viewer recognized Robert Peter Clark, the man living quietly in Virginia, and alerted authorities. The network had unwittingly triggered the unraveling of a life built on lies and death. When law enforcement arrived at his door, they found a man who seemed ordinary, a grandfatherly figure who smiled politely as officers identified themselves. The duality of his existence, the loving man in public, the calculated murderer in private, was staggering. As John List was taken into custody, he did not resist. He simply accepted the consequences of a life spent hiding from the truth he himself created. John List's story shocked the nation because it shattered the comforting belief that monsters live only in distant, dark corners. Sometimes they live next door, disguised as ordinary citizens, their evil measured, quiet, and hidden behind the most convincing of masks. His ability to disappear into the fabric of society, maintain a seemingly moral life, and evade justice for decades speaks to both human ingenuity and human depravity. The List case continues to fascinate true crime enthusiasts because it embodies the ultimate betrayal. A father, a husband, a son, a neighbor, all roles trusted by society, turned into instruments of death. Every photograph, every story told by neighbors, every anecdote of kindness becomes tinged with doubt and horror once the truth is revealed. The man who lived a double life for 20 years reminds us that the face we see may not always be the truth, and sometimes, the quietest people harbor the deadliest secrets. For nearly 20 years, John List existed in a world of his own making, a shadow of the man who had once walked among neighbors in Westfield. Now known as Robert Peter Clark, he had reinvented himself in Virginia, settling into a quiet life that bore no resemblance to the horrors of his past. He moved methodically, choosing towns and jobs that would never draw attention, avoiding any situation that might threaten the fragile illusion of normalcy he had constructed. Robert attended church services regularly, volunteered in the community, and cultivated relationships with colleagues and neighbors. He became a model citizen in the eyes of those around him, a man whose reputation was spotless. Parents trusted him with their children, co-workers valued his steady judgment, and friends relied on his guidance. Yet behind his calm demeanor, the machinery of his mind was always running. Every interaction was measured, every conversation monitored for potential risk. Every day was a rehearsal in concealment. Even simple routines were rehearsed. He knew which streets to walk, which stores to frequent, and how to answer casual questions about family or background without giving himself away. He invented stories of deceased parents and estranged siblings, weaving them into his conversations with enough detail to make them believable. At the grocery store, at church functions, at local cafes, Robert Clark was a man whose past was invisible. And yet, that past remained very real: untouched bodies, a frozen household, the evidence meticulously preserved in Westfield. Despite his outward composure, he could not escape the occasional pangs of guilt, or perhaps, a fear of discovery. Every letter he sent, every check he wrote, every tax form completed under his assumed identity, was a careful calculation. A single slip could expose him. He monitored the news obsessively, particularly stories of missing persons, murder investigations, and law enforcement breakthroughs. Each report was both a warning and a lesson in what could betray him. He developed routines that allowed him to stay under the radar. He traveled for work but avoided staying in one place too long. He made sure no single person had access to enough of his life to see inconsistencies. He observed human behavior carefully, noting how people lied to cover small mistakes, and adjusted his actions to maintain credibility. Over time, he became a master manipulator, understanding how trust could be earned and how it could be weaponized to maintain invisibility. Yet, even the most meticulous lives have cracks. In 1989, a single broadcast would shatter the delicate balance. America's Most Wanted aired a segment detailing the List family murders, highlighting the precision of the killings and the fact that the perpetrator had vanished without a trace. For 20 years, the story had simmered in the public imagination, but now it was thrust into living rooms across the nation. Viewers were shown photographs of the family, the crime scene, and a composite of what authorities believed the killer might look like decades later. One viewer, attentive to the details, noticed something chilling. Robert Peter Clark, who lived quietly in Virginia, bore an uncanny resemblance to the composite sketch. Memories of a new neighbor from 20 years prior suddenly aligned with the images on the screen. The tip went directly to law enforcement, setting in motion a chain of events that would bring John List's decades-long deception to an end. When authorities approached Clark's residence, they were met with a man who exuded ordinary civility. He opened the door calmly, offered polite greetings, and allowed them inside without resistance. The house was orderly, pristine, and devoid of any hint of past horrors. In the kitchen, family photos of his assumed life hung alongside certificates of work and volunteer service. Everything appeared normal, because to Robert Clark, normalcy was a shield, and the past was an abyss he had carefully avoided. Yet, as officers identified themselves, the mask began to slip. Subtle changes in expression betrayed the careful calm he had maintained for decades. His voice, steady at first, wavered slightly. His eyes darted toward the door as if seeking an escape that did not exist. Within minutes, the truth was undeniable. Robert Peter Clark was John List, the man who had murdered his entire family in Westfield, New Jersey 20 years earlier. The arrest sent shockwaves through both communities. Neighbors who had known him as Robert Clark were stunned. How could someone so kind, so dependable, have hidden such darkness? Psychologists and criminologists dissected the case, attempting to understand the duality of a man who could commit horrific crimes yet live a law-abiding life without detection. Theories abounded: obsessive control, meticulous planning, detachment from empathy. But no explanation could fully reconcile the kindness observed in Virginia with the cold-blooded murders of New Jersey. The media coverage intensified, painting a portrait of a man who had mastered the art of invisibility. Interviews with acquaintances highlighted his generosity, his calm demeanor, his seemingly unremarkable life. Yet, juxtaposed with the grisly details of the Westfield murders, the narrative became almost surreal: a man who could exist simultaneously as a monster and a model citizen. The nation watched as authorities transported him back to New Jersey, ready to face trial for crimes that had haunted the public imagination for 2 decades. John List's capture also reignited interest in the broader implications of long-term evasion. Law enforcement agencies began examining how individuals could exploit administrative gaps, changing identities and community trust to hide from justice. The List case became a reference point for criminal profiling, teaching a generation of investigators how patience, observation, and routine could both mask and reveal human deception. Even as List sat in custody awaiting trial, his story was far from over. He would need to explain the rationale behind the murders, his years of concealment, and his seemingly paradoxical life. The chilling juxtaposition of a devoted public persona with a hidden history of meticulous murder continued to captivate the public. True crime enthusiasts and psychologists alike debated the motivations, the psychology, and the meticulous planning that allowed a man to live a second life for 20 years. The duality of John List's existence serves as a haunting reminder: evil can be patient. It can hide behind social norms, good behavior, and charm. And sometimes, it can thrive undetected, masked in the mundane routines of ordinary life. In the next chapter, the story of his trial, confession, and the reckoning of a life built on lies will unfold, revealing both the personal consequences of his actions and the societal fascination that such crimes continue to provoke. John List, after 20 years of hiding behind Robert Clark, finally faced the world he had long evaded. The trial was swift by modern standards, but the impact was staggering. Witnesses, neighbors, and acquaintances recounted a life of kindness and normalcy, while prosecutors painted the chilling portrait of a man who had methodically murdered his entire family. The courtroom was a collision of disbelief and horror. List confessed in detail, describing the calculated precision of his crimes, the rationale behind his concealment, and the meticulous creation of his new identity. He spoke without apparent remorse, recounting routines and careful steps he had taken to avoid detection. Psychologists would later study his calm, detached manner, noting how he compartmentalized his life into 2 entirely separate existences: father and husband, then killer and fugitive. The sentence was life imprisonment without parole. For the world, justice was served, yet the case left an indelible mark on society. John List had shown how a man could hide in plain sight, how evil could be patient, and how appearances could be deceiving. Today, his story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that darkness can dwell behind the most ordinary faces, and that the quietest lives sometimes conceal the deadliest secrets.